Hello again. Okay, we just talked about law of sines. So now we're going to talk about law of cosines. It doesn't matter what order these are taught. You can do law of sines first or law of cosines. So it's not like you need to know what the last video was about in order to do this one, okay? So law of cosines, we are going to use law of cosines when we talked about, plop this back up. We talked about law of sines, and we would use this when we knew two A's, the little a, the big A, the little b, the big B, the little c, the big C. So if we knew two of the same letter values, we could use law of sines. However, what if this gave us angle A and then little b and little c? We don't have two of the same letters as far as like a capital and a lowercase a or b or c. So we can't use law of sines. What we would use is law of cosines, okay? So let's look at this guy. We're solving the triangle, and we know that there's 6 pieces in the triangle. So we know we need angle A, angle B, angle C. We need little a, little b, little c. We do not know if this is a right triangle or not, so we can't just use SOHCAHTOA. We need to use law of cosines or law of sines. So we know no angles. We don't know any angles. We only know all of these sides. So we know that little a is 6, little b is 5, little c is 4. Looks like we're actually not solving the triangle. We're just solving for c, which is nice. We only have to find one value, okay? So since we don't know 2 A's, 2 B's, or 2 C's, we need to use law of cosines. They're asking us for this guy, so we need to use law of cosines such that the C's are on the outside. So law of cosines, let's talk about that guy first. It looks just like the law of sines. You can write it 2 different ways. Law of cosines, we can write 3 different ways. It just depends on what we have and what we want to know. So since we want to know a c, we're going to start with c. So this is a little c, a squared plus b squared. So that looks a lot like Pythagorean theorem, right? So that's a good way to start to memorize this guy. So we start with the Pythagorean theorem, and then we're going to go minus 2 of each of those letters. So 2, and then we're going to put an a and a b. And then we're going to multiply it by cosine of whatever this letter is, c. So notice that these 2 guys are the same. One's capital, one's lowercase, right? And then we have a plus and then a minus. This guy looks a lot like Pythagorean theorem, which we're so familiar with. So maybe that will help us kind of get started when we're writing those guys out, okay? So this is one of the formulas. What if we were looking for b? If we were looking for b, then we would start with b first. So little b equals, and then instead of a and b squared, it would be a squared and c squared. It's addition, so it doesn't matter which one we do first, minus 2 times one of each of those, so an a and a c, cosine of whatever this letter is, b. So this is another way to look at law of cosines. Okay, last and not least here is looking for a. So we would do little a squared equals, what are the 2 variables left, b and c. We're squaring them and we're adding them together, minus 2 of whatever these 2 letters are, so b, c, and cosine of whatever that last guy, outside guy is. Okay, so this is the law of cosines. We need to figure out which one we want to use. The best way to look for it is figure out what variable you want to solve for first and start with that formula. Okay, so we're going to use this guy. We're going to use the c squared equals a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cosine of c. Now, let's start plugging in what we know. This one, they gave us all of the lowercase letters, so let's plug them in. So we know c, little c is 4 squared. Little a is 6, so 6 squared. Little b is 5 squared. Minus 2 times 6 times little b is 5 cosine of c. Okay, so let's start taking this little by little. If you try to put this all in your calculator, we're going to come up with a mistake. So we have to be smarter than our calculators here. Order of operations is huge. A lot of kids put all of this in their calculator and get that answer out and then multiply cos c. Nope, not the case at all. This is add and then subtracted, right? So really this isn't going to be a number in front of cosine. So this is all one number. okay? Just a really weird way of writing a number. All right, so very, very, very important. Do not put all of this in your calculator. You're gonna come up with some typo errors in there, okay? We gotta be smarter than our calculators. All right, 4 squared, 16 equals 36 plus 25 minus, we got 2 times 6 times 5, so that's 30 times 2, that's 60. We can add these guys together, so we get 16 equals 61 minus 60 cosine C. This cosine C is attached to the 60, so you can't say, oh, that's 1 cosine C. That doesn't work that way, okay? It's like saying we have 61 minus 60x. This does not equal 1x. You can't simplify that at all, right? So you've got to be really careful with this. So we want to get this entire term, including the negative, we want to get this guy alone, okay? So what are they doing to this yellow blob? Well, it looks like there's a positive 60 with it. So we need to get rid of a positive 61. We need to get rid of a positive 61 by subtracting each side from 61. So subtract 61 from each side. We get 16 minus 61. We get negative 45 equals negative 60 cosine of C. Remember that this is just a really nasty way to write a variable. So take it to something you know. Whenever you look at something, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what they're talking about. What is this math magic? Just make it into something more simple that you know. If I gave you this and asked you to solve it, you could solve that no problem, right? Divide by negative 60. Divide by negative 60. Think about it. That's all math is. It's just the little teeny algebra, pre-algebra steps magnified, okay? So break it down to something that you know and are comfortable with. So in this case, we're going to divide by a negative 60. Divide by a negative 60. Okay, so this should be 2/3. Let's see. So negative 45 divided by negative 60 is 2/3. We get 3/4. So we get 0.75 equals cosine C. We need to find C, which means we can't divide by cosine, doesn't exist, but I can sure cos inverse both of those sides. So cos inverse of cos goes away and we're left with just C. And then we need to do cosine inverse, so we'll do cos inverse of second answer. We get 41.4096, so 41.4096. It doesn't tell us what to round it to, but it absolutely will in the problem, either on, your state test prep, ACT, SAT, or within Canvas on the homework or practice assignments that you guys are doing. So let's say that this was to the 10th power. So we would get angle C is 41.4 degrees. If it said solve for the triangle, we'd have to go find all 6 pieces, 3 of which were given to us, so we still have 2 more to find, okay? So let's look at this guy. We need to find A when we're given those pieces, okay? We don't have big A, little a, big B, little b, big C, little c. Since we don't have 2 of the same letter, we gotta do law of cosines. Okay, we are looking for A again, so let's go ahead and look at our formula. Remember, if we're looking for A, we should use the formula with an A on the outside. Okay, it doesn't matter if we're looking for a big A or a little a. All right, so let's do the A one. So we're going to go A squared equals B squared plus C squared minus 2BC cos A. A's on the outside. Plus in here, looks like a little Pythagorean theorem, kind of with the messed up switched letters there, which is fine. Minus 2 of these, one of each of those, B, C. Okay. All right, now let's start plugging in the numbers we know. So we have A is 29 degrees. So we get cosine of A, which is 29 degrees. B, we don't know what A is. We'll put that in there. A is 66 degrees, or 66, so 66 squared. Plus C is 88 squared, minus 2 times 66 times, 88. All right. So let's start plugging this in. It looks like Technically, you could plug this whole thing in your calculator. I really don't like it when students do that because it's so hard to see, like, they just kind of get used to doing it and they want to do it up here. So for me, I still do piece by piece. I think it's just easier to do and less mistakes are made. Okay, so 66 squared and then 88 squared. So let's add those two guys together. So we get, what did we say that was? 4,356 and 7744 minus, let's go ahead and figure out what 2 times 66 times 88 is. We get 11616 cosine of 29 degrees. We already added those two together and we know we got 12100 minus, okay, so then I can do this guy minus that times, what was it, cos 29? That times cos 29. Okay, so we get, there's no good way to put that calculator so you can still see 10159.5825. Okay, so we have this answer. We got that nice little decimal in there. So let's go ahead and do 121.00 minus second answer. All right, because that was the last guy we needed. We needed to plug in 12,100 minus 10,159 point blah, 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 blah. So we get a squared is this guy. 1748. Okay, now how do we get just a? When we have a square, we need to undo a square. We square root it. Okay, a equals, we're going to go ahead and do the square root, which is right here above the square symbol in blue. So we push the blue button, we push the square button. I don't want to type that whole big number in again, so I'm just going to go second negative to get that answer key. If you're not comfortable with that, then you can just do the square root and then type that number in, no problem. And we get 44.05. Okay, so we can say that A is 44. And that's all they wanted. They didn't want us to solve for all the things, so we're good there. Let's see, is that it? That is it for law of cosines.